Mubashar Chaudhry from Bristol Talk. Today our topic is about Islamophobia. Islamophobia at the moment, if you can see, is being faced by Muslim community, not in the United Kingdom, but in most part of the world, you'll see this problem. So today we have a specialist, Farooq Siddique. So he's a columnist, he's community activist. He will put a light on that, why this problem is arising and why is it growing. Alongside we have Hutchinson. So he's Labour Party councillor. He spent a lot more time with politicians, and he was in politician since he was 20. So we'll see like how actually Islamophobia was that a problem previously, or it is growing now. So my first question would be with Brother Farooq Siddique. Can you put a light on recent statement given by Ryanair boss? How you see it?
Yeah, a couple of days ago, the head of Ryanair made a quite provocative statement to say that more Muslim men should be going through security checks more, and families should go through without any checks at all. I mean, that's a very irresponsible thing to say, and anytime I hear politicians or big businessmen or indeed celebrities making statements that are clearly Islamophobic, you have to look at what other things they also say.
And it does impact like to a common man's mind, because they see if someone, a very responsible person into a responsible position saying that might be right.
Well, all you have to do is put yourself in a position of somebody going through a security check at the airport. You've got your children with you, you're late for your flight possibly, and you have to take off your belt, you have to take off your shoes. And if you have a look at the stress that causes anyone and everyone, and it's because one person tried to smuggle on a little bit of a liquid where he made a bomb, it's discomfortable. You're putting people through hassle, and people think it's unnecessary. That, what am I going to hide in my heels or something like that. So there is frustration there. And when somebody like Michael Cllr, and this is for his planes, this is for the safety of his planes, this is what our security services are saying is for the safety of the airlines. We're protecting the public. That's the official message. When somebody like that, the head of an airline, says he criticizes the security operation, Joe Public is going to think, yeah, he's absolutely right. Why are they checking me when the Muslims are the problem? So if it's young Muslim men, go after them. Why are you harassing a 98-year-old white woman or this family here? Why are they having to go through security checks? Well, the answer to that is quite simple for Michael Cllr, is that if that's what we did, if we made out that it's just going to be young Muslim men that are going to be stopped at the airports, then those young Muslim men will start traveling with families, because they know that's not what you're looking for, But the reality for this, if I can call him an idiot, is that the reality is Cambridge University did a study a couple of years back, and 88% of the people being stopped at airports, for example, under Schedule 7, were Muslim. So it's already happening. We are already being profiled. So imagine if a white person is going through security and saying, why me? I'm a Muslim. When I go through security at an airport, I also say, why me? I'm not a terrorist. 99.9% of the people that follow my faith are not terrorists or potential terrorists. So this is what we call a dog whistle.
So I go to Roger now. So Roger, what you've seen all those eras like of politics and all that. Why this is particularly, especially when you see the media, you'll see like it's always been criticizing Muslims, whereas like might be 1% is doing something wrong, you are basically putting all 99% into it. And it is not like 1% exception in Muslim community. You will see in all communities, you will see that 1% is there. Why actually the Muslims are being targeted? Do you think like is something is very common now, or they were previously? What are your thoughts on?
I think it's more common than it was maybe 5 years ago. Easy probably to say that it has something to do with Brexit, but it has. There's certainly been a rise in people's thinking that they can, they're getting rid of the foreigners so they can say what they like about them. The same thing in some ways applies to stop and search. That's just one section of the community that happens to. And there is an increase in hate crime as well that's happening. I mean, it's a real worry that it's happening in this country. It's also a worry that it's spreading.
Like me, who come into the United Kingdom, we feel like as a home. We teach our kids like this is our home, and we need to contribute into the society. And when you being questioned like that, it really hurts. So means, do you think is one of the a particular way of trying to disengage the community or provide putting a rift into the communities? Like it is basically a propaganda behind that?
Yes, I'm quite sure it is. I'm quite clear there are people, and there always have been people within the community that want to drive that wedge in.
This Ryanair boss has said something. So is there any institution in the government who can ask the person if someone says these type of racist remarks, which is directly affecting a community, in this case the Muslim community? Is there any place where the community can go and say these kind of remarks are purely based on racism, it should be punishable?
I thought there were laws that covered it.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a look at Michael Cllr, it's a good point. If you have a look at Michael Cllr, the other things he said, forget what he said about Muslims, but the things he said about homosexuals, things he says about a whole variety of people, his own staff, the things he says about his own staff, is quite derogatory. He's just one of these idiots that says something just to provoke a reaction. So he's got us talking about him, he's got us talking about his airline, and if anyone's watching this, and just don't travel on Ryanair. That's the answer. That's what we can do. Is boycott Ryanair, and I think that's trending at the moment. Is boycott.
This is not going to resolve the problem.
No,
because obviously there are people who like his statement, and they will probably start using more Ryanair, considering they're like-minded. So ultimately, this division, how we as a Muslim community, especially living into the country, United Kingdom, what should our reaction would be in response to these type of things? A logical reaction through which we can, we can counter these type of things, and in reality, we can prove these type of things as a wrong.
There's only one way. The vast majority of people who don't like Muslims are people who've never met Muslims. A recent survey, I think, is around 40% of people think Islam is a threat to the United Kingdom. Yeah, that's quite a statement to make. That they believe contradicts British values. It's not compatible with British values. Around 40% also have never met or have no direct workplace, leisure activities. They don't know any Muslims. They haven't met any Muslims. So just on those figures alone, you can see that not interacting with Muslims leads to a fear of Muslims, or a distrust of Muslims, and it leads to when you fear something, when you don't understand something, eventually that leads to hate. And that hate, as we've seen in Germany, as we've seen in Myanmar, as we've seen in places all around the world, that hate leads to something.
When we are open, when we go and when we can work, when we've been in politics, and police, in different institutions, people start knowing us a bit more about, like, there is no difference. Sometimes difference is on its own, like, is a threat, because you don't understand, like, what other person thinks, how that person thinks. So when we are involved in them, then they realize, like, it's
So I'll give you an example. Is obviously Islam, Muslims. So the focus of Islam Muslims is the masjid, the mosque, and we open the mosques up now to the wider public, to our neighbours, to non-Muslims, and encourage people to come in and visit and ask questions. And when we first did it, after 9/11, that was the need. And this is very important, because before 9/11, this community, our community, mainly Pakistanis, just kept themselves to themselves. Yeah, they didn't talk about their faith, they just carried on living their normal lives. When 9/11 happened, suddenly everything was about Muslims. And our community was not ready for that.
That's right.
We weren't expecting everyone to suddenly point fingers at us and say, you're a threat, you're the fifth column, you're trying to take over, you're terrorists, you carry out suicide attacks. All of this was possible, all of these lies about Muslims were possible because people didn't know anything about Muslims and Islam. Because we were too busy working. The corner shops, enterprise, we were a resourceful community, but we didn't have time to talk about our faith to non-Muslims. We barely had time to talk about our faith to our own children because, the first generation was so busy. So when 9/11 happened, suddenly it was very easy to fill in the blanks. Yeah, if a non-Muslim didn't know what Islam was, suddenly their idea of Islam came from the TV screen. Osama bin Laden, that's what they are, that's what they do. And we've been playing catch up ever since. So now what we have to do, even though we've been doing it now for close to 20 years, 19 years now, 20 years, we have to double that effort, because what we're up against is this incredibly powerful institution called the media. Yeah.
I think media played a big part in that.
Played a huge part in the negativity that Muslims now see. I don't know if you saw Question Time last week, and the BBC took one clip of this lady talking about how the NHS is being driven to the ground by all these foreigners, the country's full up, and they sent that clip out without any critical analysis. She just aired her grievances, and the BBC of all places cut that clip and put it out separately by itself, and it's gone viral. And all of the, as you were saying, the Brexit type, they all share that view. But what concerns, and we know that view exists, but what concerns me is that the BBC would allow such a clip to go unchallenged as a separate part of their output. If you don't challenge those statements, which everything she said was a lie, by the way, if you don't challenge it, then all it does, like Michael O'Leary does, like Boris Johnson does, is you appeal to the lowest common denominator, and you appeal to hate, which is the easiest way to get votes. If you feed on prejudice and discrimination and the other.
And big issue is that there is no sense of responsibility in anywhere, in any institution. I don't know why is it happening. Even last time, like close to our Filton, there was one guy, I forgot the name, but he was making bomb in his house, and he was a white guy, and when
white
national. And when I speak to the authorities, police, and say what charges are against him, and he was not being called a terrorist, because if you see purely, he was making a bomb, obviously, and if you see his statement,
ideology.
So if you see on his social media, his hate was clear, it was against Muslim, and he was just going to execute it, and all it is, they caught him. And when I asked, like, why the word terrorism is not being used here, and there was no answer to it. But my worry is, when in 10 years down the road, like when you see someone, a list of terrorists, you will see, all the Muslim names. But the reality of the matter is, actually, there are a lot of other incidents, but is not being categorized in the same category. And in 10 years down the line, if someone sees that list, they see all Muslims who are doing wrong. The person who drive all the way from here, Cardiff, to London, and killed drove a van, I believe he was not called a terrorist.
Yeah, and this is why I don't like the word terrorism or terrorist, because it's a politically loaded term now. Because when a white person, non-Muslim, does it, the person is mentally ill, the person has a history of mental illness, or he's got issues of poverty, or whatever it is. But it's not terrorism. Yeah, even though it's backed up by an ideology, a right-wing nationalist, white supremacist ideology, it still isn't classified as terrorism. It's changing now a little bit.
Does the terrorism act is mentally ill? So,
but you have to accept that. Where did it come from? It came from 9/11. Yeah, this is where all this Islamophobia came mainly. And 9/11 was a political event. Yeah, the only reason 9/11 happened is because of what we call the F word, which is foreign policy. Regardless of what you want to make hay, deny it, reality is those people were able to recruit people in this country because of a simple thing that you're bombing. When you're bombing people in their country, it's easy to recruit. And these people have nothing to do with religion. For political motivation of their own, they want to be politically in charge in their own places. They recruit people across the world to cause mayhem, to cause chaos around the world. Yeah. The word Islamism, for example, we're fighting Islamism. That's what the government says. That's what our security services say. But to Michael O'Leary and to that lady who came on Question Time. By the way, she turns out now to be a National Front candidate. She was a local councillor for the National Front, which raised all kinds of questions for the BBC and Metro productions. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So when people like that, when you see the word Islamism, which is why I'm so against that term, is that the non-Muslim community, all they see is the word Islam. Yeah. So when our security services are fighting the Islamists, they're fighting Islam. So the Muslim sees this as well as somebody who doesn't know much about their faith, isn't well practicing in their faith, is busy doing stupid things outside. Suddenly starts hearing about this war against Islam. And suddenly this young man will say, woman will say, you know what, I have to defend my faith. Even though they don't practice it. Even though they don't have, they don't go to the mosque 5 times a day, or don't know the imam, or have never spoken to the imam, they will then suddenly think, my faith is under attack, because that's how I identify. So everyone has an identity. So these young kids have an identity that they think is Muslim, because the media is telling them you're Muslim, you're the other, you're the threat. Yeah. So these young kids who don't have good role models, and how many good role models have we got? They don't have good role models. Suddenly, in the internet, when you want to ask a question about Islam, why does terrorism, for example, happen in Islam, or Muslims do it? You're not going to go to the imam. You're not going to go to the mosque and ask these questions, because the likelihood the imam will report you to the police. So who are you going to go to? You're going to go onto the internet. You're going to ask these questions. You're going to type in terrorism. You're going to type in Islam. You're going to type in Osama bin Laden. You're going to type in ISIS. And believe you me, don't do it. But if you do it, the things that come up is horrific. And you will believe, genuinely believe, that there is a war against Islam. Yeah, they'll give you, I've seen it because it was part of my research, it was my job. Yeah, I've seen on the internet where they give you an example of the Crusades. So this is how the non-Muslims think of Muslims. Yeah, they hate you so much. This is what they say. that they hate Muslims so much that when the Crusades happened, they didn't even think you were human beings. They took your babies, roasted them on fires, and ate them.
It's all about spreading hate. Roger, what's your views on that?
But you wouldn't believe that, innit? If you heard that, you would think that never happened.
Mm.
But the reality is, it did happen. Those horrific crimes did take
We
place.
simply express it. If we have some other kind of like stress, depression, so it means like there is anger. That anger needs to go out. So that anger needs a direction. So in like, you know, slowly and steadily the direction is diverting toward Muslim religion. And obviously, you know, people don't realize like actually they are being directed, unfortunately, to that. And
Yeah.
I just wonder, the story's been taken through in EastEnders at the moment. I don't know whether
I don't watch it.
you've watched that. There's a young white lad who killed his sister when he was quite young, and he's out of prison, and his father, he's got a thing about him and the rest of it. And he can't fit into the house. And he suddenly decided, and it don't know whether it was anything to do with prison, I don't think they're suggesting it is, but it might have been something he meant, has converted.
Okay. In prison.
No, he's converted since he came out.
Okay.
He's now been pursued by a group of youths, and he's in hospital fighting for his life at the moment.
This is an EastEnders storyline.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just wonder whether that has any impact on.
Yeah, I mean, it's how Muslims are being portrayed. You know? If we're always, the narrative is always the other. Yeah, that they're from abroad. You know, I was born here. I was raised here. You know, this is my home. Yeah. And when somebody here tells you, you know, go back to your own country, it's an odd thing for them to say. Yeah? But unless we make that effort as Muslims, as Pakistanis, as Indians, as Bangladeshis or whatever, unless we make that effort that we, you know, our ancestors, you know, in the Second World War, this country wasn't going to win the war without
and I think these stories needs highlights.
Yeah.
So that's a counter attack. I would say, like, and these stories is highlighted. And second thing, like the way I seen, like, you know, with the media, through the media and all that, like, basically, for example, everybody has a nature. Yeah, some people have extreme nature. Some people have a different type of nature. But being extreme does not mean bad. Like once you divert that into a bad side, it becomes bad. But if you put that person into business and that is extreme in that business category, he could go very well. In politics, he could go very far. But once obviously it goes to a different direction, unfortunately it goes bad. The problem with this is, like, you know, slowly and steadily it's being putting into that, and some of our obviously youngsters especially, they take it differently, and then, you know, the extremism element is growing in that way, and I believe purposely is being done in that way.
Perfect. I mean, we have to be very, very, the other thing, we're talking about Islamophobia, but I think we have to be very, very careful is that we don't develop a victim mentality. This is very important.
That's important.
Because if we go down that path, then you're reinforcing the message that there's a war against Islam. And
this is what the youngsters are perceiving.
And they're getting that anyway. Yeah. So we have to be, I mean, how does Islamophobia impact us? When you have, and the research has been done now, so much of research on this, independent research has been done. So anybody with a Muslim name is less likely, 7 times less likely to get a job interview. Yeah? Just on the CV. Same CV, all it is, the difference is the name. 7 times less likely to get the job interview. If you pass the CV, if you get the interview, the likelihood of you getting the job is virtually zilch. Yeah? if we start doing this, and we know what happens then, because if you start having an economic impact on Muslim society, which is exactly what's happening now, then what happens? The marriages break down. The family breaks down. Why? Because poverty does that. If one person can't get a job, the other person is struggling to cope. You know, we now have two job families. The mother's working, the father's working. Who's got time for the kids? You know, who's gonna support the kids? How is our infrastructure? What's our infrastructure? The mosques, the community centres. We haven't got much more beyond that. But what are our mosques doing? Are they putting these social programs into place? That's where we have to be now. We have to be looking at these kinds of advice and support and job applications and how to do your CVs and training programs and apprenticeships. That's what we unity. That's what we need.
And even in my view, like this is not the war of Muslims. This is the war of United Kingdom citizens.
Absolutely.
So it means like this country is like well known for being together and is a culture. And you know, like if something like drift happens, it's gonna affect the whole country, not one particular community. We all need to work together on it.
It's already affecting the whole country. Look at Scotland, look at Northern Ireland, look at Wales, look at England. You know, we're already drifting apart, because once you start targeting one community and you start to get away with it, it's easy to target the next community.
That's right.
You know, anyone who's different gets targeted. And when did this all start? When did these, you know, I know you're saying Brexit, but you know what I think happened is when Trump came to power in America, what he brought was what is now termed as fake news. Yeah? He just lies and lies and lies and has no concern about being caught. It's a shamelessness.
Yeah.
The lie, you know, he wrote a book called The Art of the Deal. I don't know if you've read it. I don't recommend it, yeah? But in it, you know what he actually says? This is his personal philosophy. Lie some more, and keep lying. And start big. Tell a big lie. Yeah? Tell a big lie, and then just keep lying. Don't back down, and eventually they will believe you.
Roger, are we going to the same direction in our politics then?
And I think that's what's happening in politics.
I think so.
By having the resignation from our Chancellor, and I see like we're just looking a fancy budget or something like that.
Look, Boris Johnson is a copy of Trump, isn't he?
Yeah, we came out of the election with people quite clearly accepting that they'd elected a liar.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely, no question about it.
And you would never have thought that possible in Britain. You thought, America, okay, idiots, yeah. You never thought that would be possible.
I mean,
2 years ago.
I've gone through years as a politician, having to stand by people that automatically say, well, you can't believe anything the politician tells you.
Yeah.
Now, you know, I take that personally, very much so, because I don't do it that way. But never as openly as...
The lies become acceptable, isn't it? It's okay to lie.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a dangerous part of what we're doing. And that's what Michael O'Leary, that's what people like Boris Johnson, that's what the media now, is that you can lie, no big deal. You know, and that is so dangerous. And Trump taught the world, when the leader of the world, free world, as they keep calling America, the most powerful country in the world, can say it's okay to lie, then all the dictators, all the despots that thought, you know, I can't do this because America might do this, or the Europeans might do this, or now they say that America's doing it.
Now, like where we are in the United Kingdom, we are heading toward a no-deal Brexit.
I think it's likely. I think it's likely.
It's much more likely, and you know, the next thing is like we need the support of USA.
Yeah.
So it means eventually we are start following the policies of US, and
brings that cartoon to mind that is the guy carrying the star from the Union Jack and putting it up on on the American flag.
My biggest concern with
It's
no deal Brexit is it's going to hit us economically. Everyone says that.
absolutely.
Even the ones that are pro-Brexit will say to you, yeah, 10, 15 years it'll be rough, it'll be tough, yeah? And they want Brexit. In those 10, 15 years, you know, all these people who voted for Brexit, when the economic situation hits them in their pocket, who are they going to blame? You know, when the countries are rich, when the people are rich,
Yeah, they don't
racism goes down.
Yes.
Yeah? Because everyone's happy. When the economic situation goes down and people are struggling in their pocket,
So you reckon
they blame someone.
Yeah.
Yeah, they want to blame someone. Who's taking my job? It's them. You know, he's over here, they're taking my job. You know, I should have had that job. So they turn.
If you see the whole stance of Brexit was that.
Yeah. It's going to turn towards us, and we, as our, you know, Asian communities, Pakistani communities, Muslim communities, we need to start preparing for that now. What are we going to do when that happens? Because it will happen.
It will happen.
And you know, the Jewish community has been through this. You know, we don't have to reinvent the wheel.
That's right.
The Jewish community went through this in the Second World War. And what was it? The Germans blamed them. Hitler blamed them for the economic, you know, the Austria Accord and the Vienna Accord or whatever it was, when they had to pay reparations. Those reparations were so high that Germany went into a recession. Couldn't afford to make the payments. People were out of job. Unemployment went through the roof. And who did they blame? They wanted to blame someone, and who did Hitler come along and he blamed the Jews? And we know over time where that ended up. And you know, there was a magazine or newspaper, Der Stürmer, yes? You know when the Nuremberg trials happened, one person was given the death penalty, and the punishment for him alone was not just a death penalty, but he would be burned, his body would be burned, and his ashes would be scattered into the ocean so that no one could know where he was buried. You know who that was? He didn't kill a single Jew, by the way. But he was the only one. They said, you cannot have a burial, nothing to mark where you're buried. And he was the person who was the editor of Der Stürmer. And the Nuremberg trial said that he, as the editor, created the situation in the country through his newspaper, through the media, that created the situation where the German population turned against the Jews, said they were a threat.
So it was the media at the end of the day.
It was the media, yeah. That was the biggest issue, that Hitler was allowed to then do what he wanted because the public supported him, because of the message of Der Stürmer and the other media.
So you reckon the same technique is going through
the
there?
Same thing is happening again. You know, the one thing we learn about history is we never learn from history. Yeah, that's the one lesson. Yeah, and we're doing it again. And if people say, you know, we said after the Holocaust, everyone said never again. In Europe, never again. We will never allow a Holocaust to happen in Europe again. It happened again in Bosnia, in Srebrenica, in Europe, in the heart of Europe, our backyard. It happened again. 8,372 Muslim men and boys were murdered in 5 days by the Serbs. And it's declared a genocide by the UN. In Europe, which is saying never again, never again. And those Bosnians, they were white, blonde, blue-eyed Muslims. And you know when the Serbs, because I went to Bosnia during the war, and you know what the Muslims, we took aid to them, yeah, to help them. We saw Srebrenica happening on TV, and we took aid to help, you know, to the refugee camps. And I saw one woman, and she screamed at me, and I had to translate it. And she was angry. We're giving aid, and she was angry. You know what she said to me? She said, "Why are you bringing this aid to us? All you're doing is fattening us up so the Serbs can shoot us." Because we weren't providing them weapons. The UN put an arms embargo on the Muslims. The Serbs had an army. The Croats had an army. They had weapons. They had artillery. but the Muslims didn't. And when they wanted the world to supply them weapons to defend themselves, you know what the UN did? They put an arms embargo on Bosnian Muslims. No one could provide them weapons. And they said, no, we'll protect you. And the UN went down and said, we'll protect you. We'll set up these safe havens. And the first time that was tested was in Srebrenica. And the UN, the Serbs came, and the Dutch UN just stood aside. And the Serbs marched into Srebrenica wearing UN uniforms and captured and killed 8,372 Muslim men and boys. And if you ask the Jews, the same thing happened there. The media turned against Jews. And then one night, the Jews call it the night of broken glass. One night, all the Jewish businesses that have been marked, smashed. Shop windows smashed. People dragged from their homes, put on trains, sent into concentration camps. And we say it'll never happen again. What's happening in Myanmar? What's happening in India right now? They're creating concentration camps. The new laws are being passed, taking away citizenship rights of Muslims who've lived there all their lives. Their ancestors have lived there from the Mughal times.
The problem is like we react very late. Like
when this is what I'm saying.
When
we have to
problems started establishing, and we should react that time.
Yeah.
Then unfortunately, when things gone beyond, and then we react, and that's a bit too late. Then
we have to be proactive, and then there's so much we need to do.
So within our domain, like what should we do? Like obviously you have a domain like as a society, as a community, as a Bristolian. What should we do? Like what point of action we're supposed to do to at least to mitigate it in our beautiful city?
This program here, for example, your reach here, your channel here, anyone that has reach, even if it's just your neighbor, I would say talk to them about who you are as Muslims. Yeah. As non-Muslims, the danger is we do programs in our own language. Do them in English.
Yeah.
Let the non-Muslims see them. Tell them what you are about as Muslims. Don't just make it Muslims like this. Make them seem so that people can see them as ordinary people. The same problems that you have, we have. Let's work together on them. We can resolve these issues together.
Roger, what are your views on the same question? Like what should we do as a Muslim, not just as a Muslim, as a Bristolian, what should we do to make sure at least like this hate should not surge into our city?
And it's difficult to give a different answer to one that's just been given. I guess I'm a non-Muslim, and I've never been into a mosque in Bristol.
Let me invite you to ours.
Right. Yeah.
You're welcome anytime.
But it's a fact, and if people, I know I have been into a mosque as well, but I guess if people.
I think like what we're supposed to do as well, like we need to open up our houses one day a year at least for the neighbors to come in to talk to us, to our families, and when we have festivals like Eid and whatever, so means that should be like not just for the Muslims to come in, it should be for all of them to come in, so that they start knowing our culture. They start knowing us like as what we are, what we think, what we eat. And then obviously once we manage to reduce this concept of difference, then we would be able to keep like more love and unity.
For example, we have Ramadan every year. And over the last couple of years, we do what we call a grand iftar. So one night in Ramadan, in St. Mark's Road, we invite all of the local neighbours to come down and break bread with us, share. And this is the most beautiful part of talking about your faith, is if you can do it over breaking bread, over food, which is the Prophet ﷺ's sunnah, which is the way the Prophet ﷺ did it. In the time of the Prophet ﷺ 1400 years ago, how he invited people to talk about Islam was over food, over dinner, over drinks.
Even I was going through the documentary, like when UK wanted to be part of Europe, first time obviously it's been turned down by the French, and second time the Prime Minister actually invited the French President into the embassy, and offer the food and then talk about.
Exactly, and that's a sunnah.
Yeah.
So anything you do that as a sunnah is going to have blessings even by itself. Whether you're successful or not, you will be ultimately successful. So open the masjids. Share bread with your neighbours, not just in the Grand Iftar. By the way, St. Mark's Road won the best street in the country because of the Grand Iftar. So if we can do that in our houses, I invite, for example, in Ramadan, we invite neighbours, to share when it's time for food. When I was a child, my mum and dad, Allah give them Jannah, inshallah, they used to tell me every time on a Thursday evening we do khatam, and mum would guarantee she would force me, I was only about that high, she would force me to take some of the food that we made to each one of my neighbours, and I'd have to go knock on the door, say, Mum made this for you, can you have it? And I didn't like doing it, but Mum and Dad absolutely insisted I go and do it. We've stopped doing that. I think that's something we should do as a community.
And even when Roger said, if we open up our doors, people might think we are different. So, reality of the matter,
but it's good to be different.
There's a lot of even what we've been told about our neighbours, to look after them in such a way, and all that is different. Really, is a positive.
There's a verse in the Quran.
I'm not suggesting that it isn't positive. I'm not quite sure what I am suggesting here, but
then your concern is correct, that it just reinforces their prejudice. If you do it wrong, it will reinforce their prejudice. I agree what you're saying.
Yeah, it's like the rumour that spreads very quickly occasionally that there's a mosque.
There's a verse in the Quran that says we have made you, God is saying, we have made you into nations and tribes so that you may come to know one another, not despise one another. And that is so beautiful, because our very difference is proof of Allah, of God. So even as Muslims, we believe there is only one God. It's the same God that you worship, the same God that we worship. There is only one.
I don't worship one.
So even if you don't, He still made you. But the reality is, if we were all the same, what a boring black and white world this would be, right?
Yes.
But the fact that we're different, the fact that I believe in God, and the fact that you disbelieve in God, we can sit down and talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we both believed in God and there was no other threat to that, what do we got to talk about?
No.
So in our difference, in the smallest difference, we can get to know each other. We can sit around a table and we've got something to talk about, something to debate, like we have here. And that's the beauty of what I feel my faith is. But this is what we should do, more of this.
So, anything else you want to share, or?
I think sometimes I've said this so many times to people. I think sometimes these huge problems can get overwhelming, and you're probably thinking, "What can I do?" You ask the question, "What can we do?" And I think, I'm only one person. What can I do? Councillor here is thinking, if he probably would have never got into politics. If you thought, what can I do? You probably would have never bothered to get into politics.
No, probably. Yeah.
But it's because you have to believe that no matter how little you can do it. And that's an Islamic concept. It doesn't matter, even if the Prophet ﷺ said, even if the day of judgment comes upon you, and there's nothing worse than that. If you're planting a seed and the day of judgment comes, finish planting the seed. It doesn't say run away or hide. It says finish planting the seed. Do what you can do, and maybe that will be.
Any religion, whatever. So basically, it's all about, when we say religion, when we say being in politics, when we say whatever, it's all about what you can give to the community, what you can make it better. So that's at the end of the day. So I think this is the message from the panel as well. So we need to work together to find out who is putting this seed of hate in it, and we need to make sure, we need to join hands and obviously put a seed of love in it, and so that our community keeps prospering, and hate has unfortunately no place.
And no religion.
In no religion, in whatever. So that's it then. Thank you very much, viewers.